So, welcome. I'm here in Thailand, and welcome to my villa that I'm currently in because the pool is just outside. This is the boudoir, and I've just recorded a very interesting, I'm super pumped episode, and I'm really excited to be sharing this with you today because what we're really diving into is how do you become the best version of you and what is really going on with how you act each and every day. And this is where I've dived into in previous episodes, but I feel like I've only really just scratched the surface. And to be perfectly open and honest, this is a journey that I'm going on as well. I'm going through, and I want to be able to take you through it. I want to actually start walking through this and being completely open about it so you can understand what is it that you can be doing. How can you be making smarter decisions? How can you be getting and achieving what it is that you want? Because I really feel like whether it is that we want to be able to have a better body, whether it is we want to be able to make more money, have better relationships, all these different things, what is it that we really want to be able to get out of that? And usually it's we want to be happier and more fulfilled. And how do we actually fast track for you being able to get there? So I want to go deep. I want to bring this conversation up, and I'm really excited that you're here with me right now. Now, also what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop a link below for you to be able to join us in the free group. This is the community where I'm wanting to build together, and it's already building, and there's so many people in it, is where you're going to be able to get the support. There's the live streams, there's the guides, there's the free downloads, there's all that stuff there, but there's also the support that you really can't get anywhere else. And this is where I want to bring together the people for you to be able to connect with, for the going through the same process, going through the same problems, and going to give you the actual leg up and the fast track for you to be able to achieve what you want as well. So be sure to join us in the free community that you can join with the link below that I'll get for you. And also make sure if you haven't subscribed to the podcast on iTunes or on Stitcher, depending on where you're listening to your podcast, be sure to click the link below and join us on iTunes or Stitcher as well. Now, let's jump straight into this because I'm really excited to be sharing this. I'm going to be getting him back onto the show because we seriously just scratched the surface oh so small, and we're going to be going deep into this as well. So let's get straight into it. Jiro, thank you so much for coming onto this show. This is groundbreaking stuff that we're going to do right now because I really haven't publicly talked about this stuff, and it's something I've been kind of consuming myself a lot with because I felt like progressions with where I've wanted to take my business, where I've wanted to go personally, like so many different things. And when you and I got chatting, and it was funny because we randomly actually bumped into each other in Bali not long ago. We were sitting in the same cafe and we're like, hey, what's up? Oh my God. Yeah. Because the first time we met was Manly.
Yeah, I saw you at Shramco's super fast business event in like 2014 or something like that.
Excellent.
But then didn't get to know you till we hung out in Bali.
Awesome. Okay, brilliant, mate. I am super pumped. Now, before we even start jumping into any of this stuff, who are you and why are you so phenomenal?
So my name is Jiro Taylor. I run the Flow State Collective, which is a platform and a resource for entrepreneurial, freedom-seeking, adventure-loving people who want to explore the idea of freedom as an inner state. They want to live their best life possible, and they know that it's not just money, it's not just the business that's going to get them there. It's this sort of holistic understanding of tapping into who you are, connecting in with your purpose, and designing this life of maximum fulfillment. So that's what I do, and I coach a bunch of entrepreneurs, a couple of guys over in Silicon Valley who are really kind of obsessed with getting that edge, that extra 1% of performance. And then I coached a bunch of other people who aren't that performance focused. They're just more interested in just expressing their full potential as a human.
Oh my God, I have so many questions. This is nuts how deep I want to be able to get into this with you. Okay, how did you get into this?
Purely by, I nearly said accident, but I don't believe in accidents. Purely by pulling the string, and one thing leads to another thing, leads to a conversation, leads to an opportunity, and then you just jump on stuff. Like I guess I'm a very opportunistic guy. But I started off in the corporate world, and I spent about 8-9 years. I was a pretty high performer in the corporate world, and there was lots of money and kind of lots of social validation and pats on the back and all that sort of stuff. But I really never ever vibed it. From day one. And I've always been like an adventurous, kind of outdoor loving, surfing, snowboarding, traveling type of guy, and I've always been really interested in philosophy and learning about my mind and what this kind of game of life is really all about. And there I was, kind of stuck in the rat race, doing a very monotonous Groundhog Day kind of existence, but yet ticking all the boxes of cultural success, but really not feeling very successful, feeling kind of like dead inside. So I did that for 8 years, and then I finally mustered up the balls to leap out of it. And that sent me on this kind of roller coaster ride of setting up businesses and struggling and succeeding and struggling some more and succeeding. And I started running these retreats based on my passion of surfing, snowboarding, and meditation. And that was like the first thing that I did, was get this group together. We went to Japan. We just slayed really deep powder, and we did meditation and yoga and flow state neuroscience kind of stuff, a lot of breath work. And from that retreat, which was epic, as you can imagine, just flowed opportunities to start coaching people, and all these sorts of doors opened. And before you know it, I was running a podcast all about flow states and peak performance and altered states of consciousness. And just one thing led to another, and here I am.
I love the journey that you've gone through, and I feel like there's a really good chance I'm just probably going to sign on as one of your clients really soon, as well, as we kind of delve into this. Because the funny thing is, in kind of how I've journeyed into being, this is such a main focus and something that consumes my mind so much of the time, everything I'm listening to, reading, and really wanting to go deep on. And I was really the person of achieving one thing, then going straight for the next, achieve one thing and go for the next. Like, it was just like, bang, up, like one after the other. And it was always my wife that would turn around and be like, Chris, like, what the shit? Like, you just did something really good. Like, enjoy it. Do you know what I mean? Like, celebrate. Because I wasn't celebrating even the small or the big things. And it was like when I published my last book, like it hit #1 in Amazon for like 3 categories. And I was like, there was 30 seconds of like, oh, that's pretty cool. And that was it. It was like, hey, what's the next thing that I wanted to do? Because I'd already kind of planted the seed of things I wanted to go and chase after this. And then it was like, what's really going on? There's so much more to success and so much more that I can be fulfilled in on a day in, day out situation. How do you help people grab their cojones about that and really, truly understand?
Well, what you were talking about just then is one of the classic things that I see in people who are very goal-focused and performance-orientated. And that's this perpetual looking ahead to the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And often what comes with that, and this is an evolutionary inheritance, by the way. I mean, if you think about it from an ancestral point of view, it really would help the survival of your gene pool to think about the potential of a famine, or to think about whether the next valley has more fertile land, or to just really just constantly be thinking about how can you optimize constantly. And in neuroscientific terms, it's created there's a guy called Dr. Rick Hansen, who's like a super authority on neuroplasticity. And he calls this the negativity bias. And the negativity bias, the way he describes it, he says that our brains have evolved to become like Velcro for the bad and Teflon. No, they're Velcro for the bad and Teflon for the good.
Yes.
So the negative just sticks, right? Because if the negative sticks, we're going to be in a heightened state of worry, anxiety, and we're going to optimize ourselves purely for survival. We increase our chances of survival. But the good slips away. But we don't dwell on the good. And what this results in is this cycle of kind of like, you're never quite there.
Yes.
You achieve the goal, you do it, but you never quite get there. You're on this treadmill, just trying to constantly achieve something inside by ticking off goals and ticking off things on the to-do list and ticking off the bucket list. And this is kind of like the sickness of our times. This is why you have like 50-year-old guys having breakdowns and buying Ferraris and breaking up their marriages so they can shag the secretary, because nothing's quite enough. They haven't learned how to like walk a different path where they can actually get that sort of satisfaction that they're trying to get. So the question that you originally asked, how do you help people actually grab this idea of fulfillment by the cojones First of all, it's awareness, man.
Yeah.
I mean, everything stems from awareness. Like, if you are not aware that you have been conditioned not just by advertising and by your parents, but also by like 50, 100, 150,000 years of human evolution. We've been conditioned, like it's in our DNA to optimize for feeding our ego and for trying to tick that goal off. So we have to become aware that that's just the case, so we can start to do something about that. Like, do you want to live your life like a caveman? Do you want to live your life like all the good shit just slips away like it's Teflon, and all the good stuff just sticks there? Like, I have a friend who had like a quarterly review at work. He's like head of marketing, so a senior dude, and a CEO did the quarterly review. And I said, "How did it go, mate?" Because he didn't look happy. And he was like, "Oh, I mean, 95% awesome. They like, they love what I'm doing, but 5% not." And I was like, "Great, let's celebrate." Yes. And he was like, "Nah, this 5% is eating me alive." Yeah. Like, he just could not handle it. So to get back to your question, we have to become aware that this is happening, that this is a pattern, that this is happening on a neuroscientific level, and that this is being perpetuated. We're being infused by all of this anxiety and fear from the culture around us, which is, and if you think about how consumerism and marketing works, they're just throwing wood on the fire. They're throwing petrol on the fire to make us buy more shit, because they know that if they poke that little like tender wound within us, which is like the need to be validated or the need to feel whole, and they just say, "Oh, you need this to feel whole, you need to do that to feel whole," then our dollars just fly out the window, and those corporations make more money. So the way to actually start solving that problem is to realize that you're never, ever, ever going to be whole chasing that hedonic treadmill. You're going to have to walk another sort of path if you actually want to achieve that kind of wholeness.
What is that path?
All right. Are you prepared to jump down the spiritual rabbit hole? Strap me in,
big boy. I'm ready to go.
Oh, man, what is that path? All right. Well, Jesus Christ was sent down by God. No. We're not going to go down that path. Well, like this is a very simple framework to understand it. There's like a horizontal axis, and there's a vertical axis. And if you think about the horizontal axis, that's kind of like what 99% of the world is walking on. They're like running away from pain, and they're walking towards pleasure. So they're avoiding the stuff that sucks, and they're trying to optimize their life for things that they think will make their lives more pleasurable. Yeah. And this is why people stay in the job that they hate for 40 years, because they think that they're running away from their fear of insecurity and being destitute, and they're running towards this dream of having like $5 million in their superannuation account so they can retire and buy a boat. Yeah. And so they're just running along this. But that's the thing. You're never ever going to get there. It's like the carrot's in front of you, but you can't quite reach it. Yep. And I've experienced that myself. And then there's this other path, right, which nobody in our culture knows anything about. But in Eastern cultures, it's just so infused. In many indigenous cultures, it's so infused. And this is the path that leads you within yourself. This is the path of self-awareness and self-knowledge, where you start to get to grips with like the roots of who you are as a human being. Like, what is it that makes you you, apart from your rig and your skin in your bones and your neurotic thoughts, and 90,000 thoughts a day. Apparently most of them are the same as the day before. We got like skin, bone, muscle, sinew, fascia, tendons, all of that. But is that it? Is that what we are, or is there something else that makes us us? Mm-hmm. And there's many traditions that explore these questions from a very early age. And when a human starts to explore these sorts of questions, something begins to happen. A transformation begins to happen, because the human starts to connect with this kind of innate or natural part of them, which isn't a function of conditioning. So everything that, if I introduce you as, "Hey, I'm Jiro Taylor, I'm the founder of the Flow State Collective, and I've done this and I've done that, and check out my LinkedIn profile. It's like an awesome list of all the ways that I'm amazing. That is all a construct. Yeah. That is just stuff that I've done. That is not who I actually am, right? That is not like my feelings, my emotions, my intuition, my sense of connectedness, my feelings that I am kind of like this awesome, magnificent, sophisticated, complex human being that's living on this earth against all the odds. Like, you got one that's ego construct, and this other thing which is like, you can't even use words to explain it, mate. Like, words are useless for that. You can only feel it. And once you start going down that path, then you start to develop this growing sense of presence. That's really the right word for it. You start developing this sense of presence, which renders that other system, that horizontal chasing, that LinkedIn profile, the whole identity construct, it renders all of that irrelevant and obsolete. You start laughing at all of that shit because you're like, fuck, that's just a game. Yeah. That's just a suit that I put on sometimes to serve a purpose. But who I am, what I am, is something far different from all of that stuff. Yep. Does that make sense?
Okay, fuck, shit. I'm writing more questions down than I can ask at the moment. How does someone go from having that awareness initially and then being able to tap into, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to use this word correctly, like, if I'm not, pull me up on it, but how does somebody become conscious of being able to separate themselves from the ego or that suit that we put on or that stuff that we say? How do we become conscious of that separation?
Great question. I mean, and let's just normalize the fact that for most people, there never will be that separation because there never will be that consciousness. And the way that you use the word consciousness is absolutely spot on, because what we're talking about here is this idea of expanding your consciousness or becoming more conscious of reality, of truth. And when you're at a certain level of consciousness, there is no separation. It's just that's just you. You are your bundle of fears. You are your neurotic thoughts, and that's it. And then as you actually mature, as you start to grow like a tree grows, you start to just become more mature and more wise and more conscious. You start to realize that, hang on, maybe I'm not my thoughts. If I can watch my thoughts, if I can observe my thoughts, like I can watch clouds passing across the sky, then how can I be my thoughts? And when you start to have a sort of realization like that, that's just one type of like profound realization that can actually stop a human in his tracks and cause him to question his entire paradigm. Another one might be sitting in a, I don't know, yoga class or meditation, or not even, maybe like just surfing. And you're sat there and you have this kind of amazing moment where you just feel completely connected to nature, to the ocean, to the people around you. Maybe it's with your family. Maybe you're sitting down at the dinner table and you just have this like moment that stops your thoughts in their tracks, where you just feel like this awesome sense of pure love and connection with your kids and your wife. And there's something profound in that will often stop people in their tracks. Or on the other side of the spectrum, the things that I've described being awesome, you also have things on the really painful end of the spectrum that often stop people in their tracks. And this is why often when somebody loses a loved one, or when someone has a relationship breakup, or when someone like hits rock bottom because of business failure or poverty or some sort of disaster, and they start to question the very frameworks that they're running in their life, the very software that they're operating in, that can often, like if you've read Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, well, that's what caused his breakthrough, was his like being so close to suicide and existing in such despair, hopelessness, that he reached this point where it kind of just wiped all that software out, kind of like defragged it, like wiped, like Control-Alt-Delete. And he just sat on a park bench for the next 3 months in this state of bliss. because all of those fears and anxieties that were previously dominating his consciousness were just gone. And what was left in place was just pure euphoria, bliss, connection with all around him. In other words, he was, for me, when I spend a lot of time in nature, just walking in forests and rainforests and jungles and being in the ocean, and I do it because it cleanses me. It sort of like, it refuels me, it reinvigorates me, and it's because I'm around all this life, but it's life without anxiety. It's life without neurosis. It's life without the ego. You know, you go hang out with some trees, man, and you're going to experience a lot of energy, a lot of life force. You know, there's a lot of like life pouring out of trees, but you're not going to feel their hang-ups about, you know, whether that tree's got a bigger set of nuts than he does, or whether that tree is more successful than he is. They're just, do you know what I mean? Yeah. So we have what those trees have, right? As in, we have within us this natural self, but then we also have this consciousness that trees don't have, which creates this ego identity, which is actually like a wonderful, wonderful tool to help us survive, to help us to project into the future, to help us learn from our past, to help us imagine another reality that we can strive towards. Like, it's a wonderful, wonderful tool. But like most tools, it has a utilitarian purpose. Like, you get a Swiss Army knife, and it's got lots of purposes. You can do lots of shit, but if you try and like paint an oil canvas with a Swiss Army knife, it's just going to be horrible and messy. And that's like us. Like, we're using our egos to try and measure ourselves, or to try and feel good about life, or to try and like, you know, connect with a part of ourselves. And the ego is simply a utilitarian tool to help us kind of like make the external world better. Yeah. It doesn't do anything on the internal level. Yeah. It cannot at all. So I've gone off on a bit of a flow ramble there.
No, so good. Okay, no. Frothing at the mouth on this right now. To kind of, and I dare say maybe, because I know I'm going to have to get you back on and do a lot more of this, so it's maybe just to scratch the surface and kind of connect it from like consciousness, figure out what's going on. Where does the world of psychedelics come into being able to bridge that gap?
Yeah. Okay, so this is the way I look at it. Consciousness is like a bright room, okay? It's just imagine this like amphitheater, like this vast hall, okay? And just imagine that it's completely pitch black, except somebody's just opened a crack in the curtains. So all you've got is darkness, but just this thin beam of light, okay? Now, that's what I view as our normal, everyday, waking state of consciousness. As in, it's light, but it's limited. It's not everything. It's not the whole picture, okay? What I view as the potential or even the purpose of my life, when I think about why am I here, why am I living? Well, I'm living just to live, but I'm living to live fully. To live fully means to explore every single layer, corner, dimension of my consciousness. And that to me feels like the equivalent of throwing wide open the curtains of that room so that light is just pouring into it. So psychedelics, for me, serve a function of showing me what illumination looks like, what further illumination of my consciousness looks like. It allows me to become aware of these other layers of consciousness. So if you think about how, we've got multiple layers of consciousness, okay? Like today, you've probably existed in 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. Like you've probably like been asleep, and then after you've probably been in that state of consciousness between sleep and full awake, where you're sort of like slipping in and out of dream state, which is an epic state of consciousness, by the way. And then you've been in a awake state of consciousness, and then you've probably been in like planning your day state of consciousness, which is characterized by beta brain waves. It's sort of like a high electronic brainwave state of consciousness where you're like analyzing, rationalizing, judging, planning. And then during this conversation, or maybe during your workout, where you just like immersed fully into your workout, you've probably been in a more of a flowy alpha state of consciousness, where you've been really, really aware on one thing, and your mind hasn't been like a monkey jumping around from one thing to another. So just there, we've got like 4 or 5 different states of consciousness. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, meditation is another state of consciousness where you ultimately get to a point where it's very similar to a flow state, where you're very still. You become aware of awareing. You become like the observer of your life itself. And then you've got the psychedelic state, which is like another state of consciousness altogether as well. And you've got different psychedelic substances and practices that can illuminate different parts of your consciousness.
Yep.
So, people who use psychedelics in a conscious, intentional way, and this is a very important point, mate.
Yep.
Like, when I talk about psychedelics, first of all, my particular practice is very much focused around naturally occurring plants, yep, rather than anything synthetic. And secondly, what I'm talking about is very much a intentional and conscious and careful use of these substances with a very specific goal in mind. When I say goal, I don't mean, I really want to like write a book, or I really want to learn how to love myself, so I'm going to take a whole bunch of mushrooms or cactus. I mean like the whole ceremony, and that's another key word. Yeah. It is a ceremony, but the whole ceremony is infused with this kind of essence of, or this spirit of curiosity. And it's infused with this, like we call ourselves, some people call themselves psychonauts, and what astronauts, yeah, plus psychedelics, like, yeah. And I like that, because you're kind of like, if you're an astronaut, you got to be a brave person, yeah, because you're going off in this spaceship where no man has ever been before, and you've got to really like be prepared to cope with what you're going to find out when you get there. Mm. And psychedelics are the same, man. Like, it's not to be messed around with. This is not stuff that kids should be doing. It's not stuff that people who don't have a certain degree of awareness should be doing. It's because you don't know what you're going to find when you get there. You don't know what trauma you've buried deep, deep, deep inside. Yes. It's not just like, you know what I mean? Yeah. This is not just fun, like fluffy bunny rabbits. Let's just go take a whole bunch of drugs and jump around in the forest and like talk about how enlightened we are. Yeah. It's actually like therapeutic. And, the first ayahuasca experience that I ever had, ayahuasca being a plant medicine that's been used for thousands of years in the South American tradition. It's a foul-tasting thing, and it's a very serious undertaking in that when you take it, you've got about half an hour of lucidity, and then, bam, you're like having an out-of-body experience. You're lying down. You might be vomiting. You might need to, like, take a shit. You're, like, purging from your body, yeah, but you're also going into visionary states. And you don't get any of, in my experience anyway, you don't get any of the good stuff, which I'll tell you about in a second, until you've gone to where you have buried deep childhood trauma, in my case.
Can I just quickly jump in, because this is really interesting. So like I myself, and this word, like I'm happy to put this out publicly, I haven't done psychedelics yet, and it's probably been maybe a month or two of like seriously researching, learning, and that's why like when we got chatting, I was like, hey, I want to like openly talk about this, because I feel like, one, there's always the douchebags that are going to want to abuse something, and I want to always be and come from a platform of how can we help serve people and give them the right information. So I really appreciate you saying that, because there was one doco that I watched. I think it was a doco about DMT, and he was also very much like, it's a ceremony. Like, this isn't something like you just like, do you know what I mean? Like, pump down, off you go, and just like let it rip. It's like, no. There's so much more to it, to the event of how it can work as well. And when you say bring up deep down emotions, I remember Lauren was telling me she had some, it was tapping, it was something, she had something, we're actually here in Thailand, we're going through a detox. She was going through a detox, and I was doing like 6 hours of Muay Thai a day. and she got brought up a memory that she'd completely buried away of her childhood. And it was just like, I was just like, oh my God, like that can happen? Like this is amazing. It's amazing how our brain works. And I appreciate you bringing the safety concerns of this forward as well.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. So what, like tapping, EFT, emotional freedom technique, there's lots of different types of things. But basically, mate, all of our emotions are held within our body. This has been well known in Eastern philosophy and practices for a long time. And Western science is actually catching up to this idea of us holding our emotions in our body and having neurons in our gut and all this sort of stuff. But we bury these things as children. Well, not even as children, as adults. We bury things that we can't process. And because we're optimizing for survival.
Yes.
So if we don't yet have the awareness or the cerebral sophistication, the maturity to deal with something difficult, then we're gonna repress it. Yep. And I've been sat next to a person in ceremony who's been like a veteran of wars. There was a dude who was a veteran of the Bosnian War, and he just had this haunted look on his face. And I asked him afterwards all about his experience, and he said that he goes to do ayahuasca ceremonies to heal himself because he's had 10 years of flashbacks of seeing mass graves and kicking bodies and shooting people and stuff like this. And he says that when he does these ceremonies, sometimes he has to actually relive the experience so that he can process it. Yeah. Like, because if you think about how he's buried this stuff as a 21-year-old soldier, because he literally can't handle it. So he'll go, so in this work, and this is very much the work that if you went to see a psychologist, like you would be doing this work where you bring out something from your past, you face it, you process it in your current level of consciousness, and you deal with it, and by processing it, you take the weight off your shoulders and you can go forth and live your life without that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I've conceptualized it so far with everything I've gone through is especially with like why as a child we can bury things is obviously a child doesn't fully understand a situation or what's going on. So they might go through an experience and it becomes buried. And then what happens is using a psychedelic to then go back to that experience, face it with that level of consciousness that you said, but as an adult, as a person that obviously understands the world in a better way, can then process it and then obviously be able to move through it. Precisely.
Yeah, that's exactly what can happen. And I'm not saying it's what always happens, but in my ayahuasca experience particular, that is exactly what happened. And I dealt with a whole load of mother stuff. And it was, it's literally like I time traveled. Like this might sound wacky, but I was, we think that we understand empathy, right? We're like, oh yeah, I can put myself in my mum's shoes or my wife's shoes or whatever. But there's a whole nother level to empathy. And I was actually kind of like watching my mother grow up as a child and like feeling her evolve as an awkward teenager and feel trapped and blah, 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 all this sort of stuff where I was actually feeling it. And the level of awareness and knowledge that I gained about who my mother is and why she is the way that she is allowed me to do a whole nother level of work of acceptance and forgiveness of my mother and forgiveness of myself and not forgiving my mother and all this kind of like this emotional debris and baggage. And for about 2 months after that first ayahuasca experience, I shit you not, I didn't even know what fear was. Like I lived in a state of fearlessness, and this was the backdrop to me launching my business, and just it felt like coming out of the closet. Like I can really empathize with what it's like for a person to be in the closet, because I felt like I was this corporate guy, successful Jiro, wears the suit, planning for the future, just doing the right thing. And I just burst out of the closet and I was like, fuck that shit. I am not prepared to live my life according to the rules of this society. This is who I am. This is what I'm going to be doing. And I just like went on this frenzy of activity where I just like, it was just living my truth. And that was, I could trace that back to that actual psychedelic experience. So yeah, it really helped me.
Okay, this is so good, and we're going to have to wrap this bad boy of an episode up right now. So 100% I'm going to kick, scream, and crawl to make sure I get you back on, because there's so much more that I want to be covering with you. This is phenomenal. Now, most importantly, where do we go to find out more about you, what you're doing, and the Flow State Collective?
Yeah, sweet. So just go to flowstatecollective.com. You can check out Flow State Collective on Instagram or Facebook as well. But if you go to flowstatecollective.com or look up the Flow State Performance podcast,
Yep.
I got about 50 episodes up there. I've interviewed a whole bunch of neuroscientists and psychonauts and entrepreneurs, and there's a whole bunch of very interesting conversation, the kind of like the conversation we just had.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to be tuning in, downloading the absolute hell out of it. I'm going to make sure I put the link into the show notes and get straight across. Mate, thank you so much for this. I've really appreciated it. I'm buzzing right now. I'm frothing on it. This has been phenomenal. So I'm really looking forward to more.
Cool, mate. It's been a pleasure.
Now it's time for you to get the most out of this, and this is where I can jump in and give the answers that you need. So ask your questions in the comments below so I can personally come through and answer them for you. Plus, the best discussions happen on chrisdufay.com. So click on over to get everything that I've got there for you. And did you like this episode? Because if so, click subscribe so I can send you all the episodes to come for free straight to you. And for everything that I can't fit in these episodes, plus the free guides and coaching episodes, then click on over to chrisdufay.com now. Looking forward to seeing you soon and in the success community.